lessons. So we got approximately halfway through. We got to the pitfalls of the teen years. We talked about the potential that the teen years bring. We gave some examples of some teens in history that have done some pretty amazing things, even though they were younger, and how our teens, as whether we have them in our homes now, they're out of our homes, or they're growing within our homes, the potential that is there for how God wants to use our children. To glorify Him and to do things for Him. But there are pitfalls. There are things that can be a problem and temptations for teenagers. There's potential for good, for sure, in teenagers, but there's also potential for some mistakes. So I'm going to jump a couple slides here to where we were, if I remember correctly. So pitfalls. So as I said, there's as much potential as there for good, which there is a lot of potential for good out of teen years, and we talked about that last week, going through all the positives for the teenage years. Teenage years are not a negative thing necessarily. They can be, and there can be parts of it that are negative, but it's really an opportunity to have some really great years with your kids and for teens to really grow. But there is potential for pitfalls, and I think we did go through some of these, but just as a refresher. So the temptations of the teen years do not come without the grace to successfully navigate them. And that's the thing, that's one of the great things with God, that even though bad times come and difficult things happen, there's always hope, right? There's always options to get through those difficult times because we have the Lord. Without Him, some of those things and some of those issues that we face, trials we face, can seem hopeless and seem, there's no escape. But the fact that we do know the Lord and know His promises, there are things that help us get through that. And that is also the same case with our teenagers that can help us get through those difficult times. So we talked about a couple things, or began to talk about a couple things that can be pitfalls in the teen years. And one of the biggest things, and this applies to us as well as adults, is just a lack of a real relationship with Jesus. Now, for those of you that are here and raising kids, you're in church, you're in Sunday school even, and might have even been at men's prayer breakfast, and you'll be here Wednesdays. I mean, you're in church a lot. And so your kids, as they grow, they're used to church. They've heard the Sunday school lessons all the way down the hallways. Once they make it to the youth group, they hear Brother Samuel preach and teach to them. They get a lot of good doctrine, a lot of good truth. And it's easy as teenagers, as they grow, to just kind of rely on the fact that they kind of know it by osmosis and by being around it, but are not actually being real to them. Right, as teenagers, not to say that all teenagers don't go through difficult times. There's some teenagers that face more difficult times than a lot of adults do. But as a general rule, life hasn't happened to them yet, right? Not in the way that it can as you become an adult and you look at your teenage years. And you thought some things were difficult, but they're difficult for that age group, not necessarily difficult looking back at it as a 30-some-year-old person. It seems like those were simple and easy. But the big thing with not having gone through some of those things is they just kind of know the things about God, but they don't know God Himself. And so as a parent, it can be a struggle, but it's a challenge to make sure that we help them to know God for themselves. Not just mom and dad's God or the faith of pastor or the faith of the church as a whole, but that they begin to develop that on their own. And that requires them to have a walk with the Lord. They can go to Sunday school, they can come to all the services, they can go to VBS, they can go to youth conferences, they can participate in our own youth conference that we have here and youth revivals, but not live out the experience of all those things that are trying to teach. Once your child is saved, the expectation is that they grow spiritually, right? Regardless of what age that is, we still want them to grow spiritually as well as physically. But if they never really learn to walk with God, right, to talk to Him on their own, to listen to Him, to read their Bible and listen to what He has for them individually, they're really not going to grow, right? They're gonna plateau. And then once they get out of the house, if that's all they ever do is live off your coattails, so to speak, on faith, once they get out of the house, the potential for them to just kind of fall on to back whatever they want to do is much higher. So we want to help them to learn to know the Lord on their own. Then again, we can struggle with that. I mean, maybe it's just me, but some days I struggle to read my Bible. I struggle to make time to actually have an actual discussion with the Lord that's not just help me this, bless me that, do me this, help this, go with this, please be with that person, okay, I got to go to work. Right? It's a struggle to not just have actual conversation with the Lord on what's really in my heart and what's going on versus just going through a list. So if I struggle with it, as a dad, and if assumingly you all struggle with it as adults, the teenagers that, they are going to struggle as well. So we have to help them through that. And the biggest way we're going to help them with that is we got to make sure that we're having our own walk with the Lord. And I think I talked about that last week a little bit. So see where we're at here. I said that your walk is so vital. I think I talked about David, right? David had great faith and he saw the Lord did many things, but David's son struggled, right? He had issues. Now, Solomon ended up doing well, but overall, David's faith wasn't Solomon's throughout his whole life, right? He had to develop his own walk with God, his own relationship with him. And the struggles that Solomon had, that David had, were different. And so our children are going to be the same way. The struggles we have in life, maybe they'll never face, but they'll face another set of struggles, another set of potential trials or issues that they'll deal with. So regardless of the what, they need to know God, because he's the one that's going to help them through that. Another place that they can struggle as teenagers, and it can be a pitfall, is lack of boundaries, clear boundaries. Proverbs 4:1-2 says, Hear ye children the instruction of a father, and attend to no understanding, for I give you good doctrine, forsake ye not my law. Teenagers have the tendency to begin pushing back at boundaries as they grow. Doesn't mean they're all rebellious. Doesn't mean they're all just trying to do the opposite of what you say. It's just freedom. It's just them growing. It's them becoming more individual. And they're going to push back against some of the boundaries and the rules that you probably have in your home. So when you have a rule, when you have boundaries, a curfew or a time for homework, however big or simple it may be, stick to it. Right? Don't allow them to now set the boundaries and set how things will be done. That doesn't mean that they can't bring good ideas to changing up the schedule or changing up the time or being something different, but don't just allow them to just say, I'm not doing that, and let it go, right? If we have boundaries, but we allow them to be crossed or to be broken and we do nothing about it, we don't have boundaries. We just have suggestions, and eventually they'll learn suggestions are just suggestions and they can do what they want instead, right? It's like when even Gemma asking, can we do this? Can we do this? Dad, I really want to just go to get ice cream. Whatever. She's spoiled. She doesn't need ice cream. She have ice cream every day. Some kids. But she'd be like, can we go get ice cream, Dad? And I'm like, I don't know. Oh, Dad, come on. Can we go get ice cream? I just got home from work. I just did this. We don't have time, or we haven't even eaten supper yet, right? Whatever the reason. But Dad, I really want ice cream. Please, can we have ice cream? And I'm like, Gemma, just stop. Not right now. And she'd be like, I'll take that as a maybe. Right? And you're just like, even at 10, she knows I've not been emphatically no. Right? I didn't say no. I was like, I don't know. I was very wishy-washy about the boundary of can we have ice cream for dinner. And when I didn't set that, even a 10-year-old was like, okay, there's this possibility I can wear you down enough that I'll get it because you're just tired of talking to me about it. Right? They know that. And teenagers will do that. You probably did that with your parents, right? You had those things that you knew you could push and get away with, and so you did, right? We want to make sure as parents that we're wise about those decisions, or we're wise about those boundaries. Be respectful of your young people, right? Be respectful of them. Treat them with respect, but don't just roll over, right? Don't allow them to treat you as though you're the roadblock for the fun. Right? You don't want them to be like, Mom and Dad are the blocking of me having a good time and enjoying my life. That's the wrong attitude for them to have about the rules that you have set in place. But if you just walk or let them through to avoid them thinking of you as the no fun parent, well, you lose all the respect and you lose all the boundaries, and now you're in a hole and having to dig your way out. You're better to stick to your boundaries when they've relaxed on their please, 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 and you can have an actual conversation. You can explain the rules and explain the boundaries and why those things are there, and then have a discussion about those things. So as teenagers, we need to make sure there are boundaries. Families that live in dysfunction seldom have healthy boundaries, right? And you might have come from that kind of a family. You might have been part of that kind of family, but you probably know families that are like that. Even Christian families, right? When there are no boundaries or no healthy boundaries, chaos will rule. It may not look like, there may not be just chaos in the house like a mess, but emotional chaos can rule as well. There has to be a list of rules for the house. You just have to have that, right? And boundaries, though, are not, and I thought this was a good quote, boundaries are not what you say they are, they're what you practice. right? So you can say you have these boundaries and that you have these rules, but if you don't actually follow through on them, you actually don't have them, right? They're just, again, suggestions at best. And with teenagers, they're going to push them because they're growing. They're becoming individual. They're learning to be their own person. And those are all good things. And we want them to do that. But we want to make sure that we, as parents, you're still, as Solomon said there, hear ye children the instruction of your father and tend to know understanding. They should be willing and humble enough to follow you. And that we need to help them to make sure that they do that. So those are a couple of the pitfalls. There are a lot of privileges, though. Oh, the title's last. That's good. There are a lot of, and this is probably going to happen again. There are a lot of privileges, right, with young people. Young people today are taking longer to grow up than any generation leading up to this time. Like the marriage rates of the age of marriage is drastically higher than it has ever been. Not to say that when your grandparents got married at 18 and 17, that was a good idea, right? Not to say that that's the way it should be, but also kids these days are waiting to be 32, 33, in their early 30s before they settle down with a relationship and those responsibilities. There's a healthy balance in between. And it's not the same for every individual or every couple, and I understand that as well. There are some circumstances that's just how it is. But in some, it's due to young people who haven't learned how to assume responsibility, to make decisions, to do the adulting, right, as they like to say, to be an adult. So our job, our goal, right, is to raise our kids to grow up to serve the Lord as an adult, right? That's our goal. That's what we want them to be. We want them to grow up to be responsible adults. Yes, healthy. Yes, successful. Yes, happy. But we want them to grow to be responsible and serve God. Every single one of our children. That should be our desire for them, is for them to grow up and to serve the Lord with their life. That doesn't mean they have to be a pastor, a missionary, or full-time. That's their job. But their life revolves around God. Right? Their job revolves around God. Where they go, what they do, what they say, what they watch, what they hear, how they present themselves revolves around who God is. That's what we want for our children. And as teens develop, we want them to develop the responsibility and to learn to live with freedom, right? So that requires us giving them privileges as they grow. So we want to give them privileges in proportion to their growing responsibility. So as your teen, and this is a good opportunity to help teach them things that they're just going to have to know in life. And maybe you learned them all from your parents. Maybe you learned them in the school of hard knocks. You just found them out when you made the mistake, right? I didn't know I couldn't do that, right? The ignorant stuff. But this is an opportunity as parents to raise them and teach them the things that they will need to know as they become adults. And a lot of it's practical. A lot of it, but it takes us taking time to do it. Financial development, right? Teach them how to manage their money wisely according to Scripture, right? Learning to use and earn and use money. It's a good idea, I think, for kids to get a job. It teaches them responsibility. They don't have to work 40 hours at 15 years old, right? They probably shouldn't. But they should be able to work somewhere and earn some money and learn how to sweep a floor, right? Learn how to interact with customers. It develops a lot of good skills that are beneficial when it comes to serving the Lord. If you are responsible with the job, you'll be responsible with the church that you're in. If you're good at learning how to interact and communicate with people, you can tell the people about the Lord. You can interact with friends in church and visitors. So all these things that are practical, they do apply to serving the Lord. So set up a checking account, right? Learning how to use a register, a checking account register, like how to add and subtract the money. And not just be like, well, I hope I got enough in there today. We've all been there. We've all lived that life. I know, and it's not fun and it's stressful. But teach them how to manage their money, how to track it, set up a savings account, how to budget, right? Help them learn the basics here. Because as soon as they're out on their own, whether it's college or just life, knowing those simple skills is pretty vital. It's helpful. Let's put it that way. You can get through without budgeting life. You can get through without, having a plan for saving money. It's doable. But man, if you've got a plan and you've got confidence in that plan, it makes life a lot easier. It makes life a lot less stressful. So help them to learn those things financially. Personal responsibility is another thing we want to help them with. That's just freedom, man. Freedom from having to be with mom all the time, every day. Right? When they're little, they're with mom and dad 24/7. And you moms know that. It's like, yes, I know they're with me 24/7. Never ends. I get that. But so as they grow, give them that freedom. Now, every kid's different. You have to make that judgment where they're at. But getting a driver's license, there's a little bit of a freedom. I mean, even some kids don't care to drive. They don't want that freedom. Man, I couldn't wait till I got my driver's license. I could drive on my own. And then I was like, oh, I have to pay for my own gas, though. Okay. So I didn't go as many places as I thought I would. Spending time with friends from church, right? Spending time with their friends that is not necessarily with you all the time. You know, as a young person, as little kids, you want to supervise all that. But as they grow, be wise, know those families, but allow them to spend time with their friends, right? Growing in responsibility to gain extra privileges. So if they take care of needful things and they show maturity, allow them time to enjoy things, right? If all they ever want to do is play video games or shoot hoops or swim or skateboard or whatever fun activities they like to do, if that's all they want to do and they'll forego the responsibilities you've given them at home, they're not learning to take those responsibilities. But once they do take those responsibilities and they are consistent with it and you don't have to ask 10 times for them to do the thing you want them to do, then give them some privileges. Give them some freedom. Show them some trust in their signs of maturity. Now, will they take a step back and make a mistake? Probably. They'll probably mess up at some point, but that's an opportunity to teach, an opportunity to show how you got to take your responsibility seriously. And because other people are counting on you and things of that nature. So personal responsibility is something we want to help them with. Relationship development or relational development. As they grow, they begin to develop more mature relationships and will desire to spend more time with them outside of your home. Right? So when it comes to teen friendships, there are two vital aspects. And this is most, we think boy-girl, but it's everything, all kinds of relationships. Purity and godliness. And that should be staples for us in all of our relationships. Purity should be essential, and godliness should be essential as well. But for teenagers, we want them to have an influence of purity, right? That what they're influenced by is pure. No Christian is perfect, right? But imperfection is not the same as impurity, right? Mistakes are not the same as intentional impurity, right? The friends of our teens as well as our teens should care about moral purity. We should care about it, which, again, if we filter things through what God approves, then everything we watch, everything we say, everything we do reflects on our moral purity, and we should care about moral purity. So we should care about it. Our teenagers should care about it. Make sure they are godly influences that their friends have, and that your teen is also a godly influence, right? We all knew those kids in high school that were not the pure ones. You knew who they were. You knew the jokes they told. You knew the talk they had. And you might have been that one for a while. It might have been you. But you know it now, looking back where you were at. We want our kids to grow up and serve the Lord and have the best opportunities. Doesn't mean that they won't be exposed to things. We can't control everything. Doesn't mean that they won't make mistakes. But we want the influence that they have as teenagers to be from a pure perspective. And that has to start with mom and dad being, you need to know. You need to be on top of it with their phones, with their quiet times, all those things. You need to know what's going on there. We want to have the pure influence, in that regards to their friendships as well. And then a positive influence, right? So a godly influence. We don't want our teens spending prolonged time with a friend who's always frustrated with authority or uses questionable language, right? If your kids have a friend that's just always, and not the police, but like their teachers, their youth pastors, anybody that is an authority over them, they just immediately bristle. That's a problem. You should not want your teen spending a lot of time with those people. Doesn't mean not to be friends with them. Doesn't mean don't be kind. It just means you don't have to be out together late or at any time by yourselves when problems can come up. And if it's your teen, which again is potential, our teen could be the one with the problem with authority or the problem with questionable language. You need to take care of those things. We need to be on top of those things and make sure that they understand the biblical perspective to authority, the biblical perspective to how you live your life, your conversation, and what you say. So we want them spending times with friends that challenge them spiritually. And I know as a teenager, sometimes that's like the most awkward thing for them. They don't know how to challenge each other spiritually or to be spiritual. And that goes back to making sure they have a walk with the Lord by themselves and on their own. But Proverbs 27:17 applies to every human being. Iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. That's not just for adult men, right? That's for everybody. When you are the right kind of person, when you're a godly individual, and you get around to other godly individuals, other godly friends, you exhort each other, right? You sharpen each other, you challenge each other. For adults, that's how our friendship should be. But that should be the friendships we want for our children as well, for our teenagers. We want them to have those kinds of relationships where it is positive influence from both sides, challenging each other to be a better Christian, even as a 16-year-old. That should be how the friendships they have are. So those are just a few practical things that we can help them develop. Now we'll get into the last part here. There's the title again. Yep, why not? Just stick with it. So the title would say Preparations for Dating. Okay, so point number 1 under the title is stay involved, right? Dating is preparation for marriage. That's what it is. Now, you're going to have your own rules, your own expectations, how you're going to handle it. And some of you have not even thought about this yet because your kids are so little. You're like, they're just going to live with me forever. I know, I get it. You never want them to leave, but eventually you will want them to leave. But every parent should, I pray for your child's future spouse. They might be alive today. They might not be alive today, depending on how young your kids are. But you should pray. You don't know their name. You don't know where they're coming from. You don't know the life experiences they have, the childhood that they have. Pray for your child's spouse as your kids grow now, no matter what age that they are. But as they become teenagers, eventually there's going to be a point where all boys and girls are gross, and now all of a sudden they're not gross anymore, right? And fortunately, Madison says boys are you still. I kind of believe her, but I see her eyes, so I know. I think she's pretending a little bit. Don't say it. She'll be embarrassed. Don't say anything to her about it. But we want every parent wants their child to come to marriage pure, right, and to come emotionally healthy to marriage. Like that's what we want. That's our desire. Again, regardless of how you found your spouse, whether it was pure, whether there was no pure, whether it was emotionally healthy leading up to it, there was a lot of emotional baggage you brought into it. Okay, you are where you are now. You can make the best of where you are now. I don't care what happened before, right? You can do what you're supposed to do as a husband and wife now. But your children are not married yet. So we have an opportunity for them to do the right thing all the way up to the marriage altar and be the spouse that God wants them to be, right? So talk to them about purity, right? And I think we've talked about this in here before. But the time to talk about purity is before they're heart deep into a relationship, right? They need, probably even before a relationship with a boy or a girl even begins, you need to have that talk. And that's up to you to decide when your kids are ready for that. But don't be afraid of it. Don't be nervous. Don't feel awkward. You're the adult. They believe you. They trust you. You're their mom. You're their dad. You know the stuff. You have kids. You know the stuff. Okay, so you have the answers. You tell them. Don't let their 15-year-old friend that thinks he has the answers tell your son or your daughter. You be the one to give them the truth. Don't be crass, obviously. Be pure, but be honest and be transparent and tell them, give them the information that they need. So talk with them about making a decision in their hearts, like Daniel did, about purposing to keep themselves pure for the one that God has for them. Right? Or the one that they'll spend the rest of their lives with, right? They talk to them about determining in their own heart that they're going to save themselves for that person. Purity, physically and emotionally too. Remember, teens don't just need rules, they need reasonings behind them. So don't just say, don't touch a girl. Tell them why, right? Don't just say, don't be doing this. Tell them why it's important that they wait. Tell them why. It's because the world's going to tell them it's not important. The world's going to tell them, you do what you feels good, and you'll learn, you'll get experience, and your future spouse will be better off because of all the experience you had, which we all know is just lies. Just lies. So tell them why it's something they need to be important to them. So be honest even in your own shortcomings in life. Again, you have to pay attention to where they're at and where your relationship is with them. But there is nothing wrong with telling your kids of the mistakes that you made and why they shouldn't do the same thing. And you'll think, they'll think worse of me. No, they won't. You're their parent. They love you to death. And if you give them the reasons and being honest and transparent with them to help them, they will see that. And they'll remember those conversations, right? So be honest with them. Talk to them about it. Tell them why it'd be better for them to learn from your mistake than make a mistake on their own. Tell them why that would be better. So boy-girl relationships touch an aspect of the heart and emotions, as well as hormones, that were not present during childhood. And that's what makes things a little more difficult even. It's because things are happening that they don't know how they feel. They don't understand it, and that's why they need you to help them with that. So when it comes to dating, and these are going to be, you're going to have your own ground rules, but set ground rules. As a relationship grows and becomes more serious, consider the following priorities. These are just things that you can consider, and you'll have your own things. But when a relationship grows, and that you can have your own even opinion on teenage dating, right? I'm not even going to tell you what mine is or what yours is, but you need to have an opinion on it. Decide what you're going to do before they turn 15. But these are things that I think every relationship should be priority in all relationships. But so we should consider them as our children start to date their potential spouses. What they do, Jesus should be the center of both the young people's lives. Now, I know sometimes that's not always the case, right? Sometimes one may be more into God than the other. One might be a little more rebellious. One might not know God. Again, if you have a teen that's dating somebody that doesn't know God, is from the Catholic Church down the road, you better know there's going to be problems if that continues. I have a friend in Brookings that he's saved. I know he's saved because we've talked about it before. I'm pretty sure he goes to the Wesleyan Church, though. His daughter is a junior at SDSU, and she's dating a Catholic boy. Strict, pretty hardcore Catholic. Good kid, great kid, real smart, loves her to death, really, and they're engaged. And he had a conversation with me at Zesto over the counter while things were happening. I'm counseling. He's like, he wants to make their kids, he wants to baptize them. He's Wesleyan, so he believes in salvation by grace and baptism afterwards. He's like, he wants to baptize their kids like they've had this discussion, which they should as being engaged. He wants to baptize their kids in the Catholic Church. I was like, that's your grandbaby right there. I go, I hate to say it, but you might have waited a little too long to talk to her about this. But it's kind of not up to you anymore. Once they get married, you're going to have to deal with those things. But what he should have done is had those conversations with her years ago, before she fell deeply in love with this nice man. And man, is she going to stop because that's his goal and that's what he wants? Probably not. So either one's going to give in to the other one and they're just going to go along with it for peace, right, in the relationship, meaning that kid is going to grow up so confused, depending on how stringent either one of them are where they believe. And so as your kids grow, they should be saved, right? Make sure your kids' dating partner, spouse, future spouse potentially knows the Lord. Make sure that is first priority. But then their lives should reflect that too. You can know the Lord, be saved, and not reflect a life that actually knows Him. So make sure that their relationship is based on you want everything that happens here to glorify God. That applies to our marriage as well. The things that happen in our marriage, the conversations we have, the places we go, the things we do should bring glory to God. Whatsoever you do all to the glory of God, even dating. Prayer and counsel. Pray. They should be praying, and they should seek counsel from their parents on who they date, right? They should. They should ask not permission, but kind of questions, advice, counsel, and then pray for them. I mentioned this already, but pray for your child, pray for your child's future spouse. They should pray for each other. If they haven't thought about that as they grow older, be like, hey, you're going to meet a girl someday, you're going to meet a boy someday, and you're going to fall in love, and that's the way the Lord wants it to be. Have you prayed for them at all? Have you prayed that God keeps your future spouse safe, that He watches over them, that they make the right decisions, that lead you to the same point together, right? Wherever that point is that God wants them to meet. So pray and then seek counsel about it. Outside friendships, so outside the dating relationship friendships, as a parent, be aware of clingy, controlling relationships. Be aware of those clingy, controlling boys or girls that just are very jealous of your child's time and almost don't allow them to talk to anybody or see anybody else anymore because it's all about me. That's a red flag, right? Those are things that we want to be aware of. A boy or a girl who's too insecure to allow their boyfriend or girlfriend to have other relationships will grow up to be a selfish spouse. That will be the trajectory unless something in their hearts change. That's what they will end up being, as somebody that is a selfish spouse. And we know through love and respect, right? It's not about me, it's about them. So whatever side you're on, husband or wife, your goal is to love her. Your goal is to love and respect him, right? It's not about what I get out of my marriage. It's about what I give. That's God's design and that's God's plan. But if it starts off in a clingy way, it can lead to potential disaster. Not to say things can't change, but you just have to be aware of those things. Time with the other family, right? So they need to build relationships with the potential in-laws, and a good relationship with both families is important. It's a good idea. So if the person your son or daughter is dating comes to see you or meets you and just like has no interest in you, doesn't want to talk to you, won't make eye contact, those are things you need to be aware of, things you talk to your child about. A good relationship, again, with both families is important. You see that as you're married now. Expressing love. Okay, so the phrase "I love you" and the phrase "I know" is special and should be reserved. I had to be reserved for someone you feel the Lord is leading you towards marriage. So these are conversations you have with your children. To say "I love you" to somebody should be almost sacred in who you give that phrase to when it comes to someone that's not part of your family, right? As a child, the person you say "I love you" to, that's a big deal. That means there's a lot of weight behind "I love you." And they should value that phrase and understand what is behind it. And so if that phrase "I love you" comes out, that those words are expressed, hopefully that they're thinking this is the one that is for me, right? And they shouldn't just be throwing that around to everybody, right? It should be something in this kind of relationship that is kept for that. Next, purity. We talked about this a little bit already. But physical contact, people draw the line at different places. You remember yourself as a teenager. Did you need lines? Did you need boundaries? Probably. When it came to physical contact with the girl or boy that you liked, just have some. That's all I'm saying. Be sure you communicate your thoughts and expectations early to your children so that they know. That's all I have to say about that. And then patience. For the young people, teach them to be patient. Not to jump in head first immediately with the first person the first time and then we're all getting married in a week, right? Some situations that it can be okay, but teach them patience for them, also for you as mom and dad. Teach yourself patience, right, when it comes to your children's relationships. Watching your child build a relationship with a person who will potentially be their future spouse is fun and wonderful and terrifying. It is, and it will be. And I have experience now that I never thought I would have. I'm not saying that's where they're at, but okay, I'm not going to, yep. Inside thoughts. Okay. Don't pressure them to move faster and make decisions before they have peace from God. Just make sure they're looking to the Lord for how fast they move, what the pace is, that they're comfortable with it, that both of them are comfortable with it. Don't pressure them to do or to not. Ask them how God has led them. You want to find a couple that's dating and say, how has God led you to where you are today? If they go, go back to number one. Is God involved in their relationship? That's a telltale sign, right? How has God led you in this relationship? Be involved in the emotions, but be patient and be in prayer as parents. As they grow and their individuality grows, your influence grows, but your ability to just say no to something lessens, right? And I've drawn that chart before. As the kids start at a young age, your obedience and influence changes, right? They obey you as children, but as they grow, it's more your influence that makes the impact versus saying, put my foot down, right? As they get older, that type of, you must listen, that the impact is less, but your heart and your influence grows. So understand that that's how it is going to be. And then as your children prepare for marriage, they think primarily of the bliss, right, that awaits them in married life. We call that the honeymoon years, right? And they think of all the wonderful things that come with marriage, which they're right. Marriage is wonderful. It's the best relationship on this earth that you can have. But as a parent, however, the post-wedding joy you see in your children begins in their own homes as they develop purity and godliness in their own family. That's when you as parents, that's when your joy will come from that relationship. It's exciting as they get married. It's exciting as all that comes to be and happens. But the most joy comes when they follow God in their own homes when you're outside of them. That's where the joy comes. And so that's where your prayer, your time invested while they're little, your explanations, your boundaries, that's why all those things are vital before that time happens so that they are prepared. Then that doesn't mean that everything will go well. That doesn't mean everything will be roses and just joy all the time. They make mistakes. Things may not go the way they want them to go. But the great thing about even those situations is that God is still God. And that means God still cares about both individuals involved in that relationship. And that means God can still change hearts. That means God can still bring great things from bad situations. So I understand sometimes those things happen. And I understand not everything always works out perfectly like storybooks type. But as your kids are kids, and that's what we're talking about here, your children as they grow, you have an opportunity to give them the best chance for the storybooks type things to come. And we all know those aren't real. We all know life is life. But they can still have joy. Marriage can be great. Marriage can be fun. It should be fun. It should be wonderful. And we want them to experience that. But it starts with us teaching them and training them as teenagers to prepare for that. Okay, we'll be done. We'll pray. Father, thank you for this.